Hey, everybody, you're watching and listening to CareMinds podcast. I'm your host, Daniel, and today's guest um, has a very diverse background and working experience. The business acumen of this person varies from launching a startup and fundraising and understanding everything about that culture to managing multi international product development teams from big corporations. She has worked in Estee Lauder, Allergan, Cerebral, Capsule, Shop Drop, to name a few. Please welcome Estee Goldschmidt, everybody. Estee, welcome to the show. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here. Very impressed by all of the background research you've done before.
Yeah, I'm extremely privileged, I think, to be in a position to interview some of the brightest minds of product development and product management. And I think your background and knowledge is something to be studied. Why don't you just take us a little bit back in the day and just tell us a little bit about how was it growing up as Estee Goldschmidt? In other words, what kind of decisions that you've made early on and what kind of experience you've been exposed to that helped you shape your career path early on?
I came to the States at the age of 17. From the moment I landed in the US, I knew it was a crazy opportunity that I shouldn't that I shouldn't let go to waste. So from the first minute, I was very involved in extracurriculars. I became vice president of one of those student societies. I wanted to be president, but I wasn't eligible based on some criteria. Got involved in all the clubs, and really just tried to absorb as much as possible to see what's interesting to me, where I'm good, what I can do. And then after college, I continued going for my master's, because I was interested and I was good at it, but I was also working simultaneously, and I worked in three different industries in the first, I think, 3, 4 years after college, really just trying out different things, seeing what's interesting. And ultimately, I decided that I want to be in business. I want to work in the business world. Um, I liked America. I liked the idea of capitalism. I felt like, coming from a post-Soviet country, and I imagine a lot of people who are not from the US who come to the US experience this, just the sheer consumerism of America was very appealing, where the consumer wins. So my first corporate job was at Estee Lauder. I love that experience. My boss was Melanie Moore. Today she's a professor. I actually think she's the dean of the beauty school at SCAD. And we worked on the
Oh, nice.
marketing team um, to launch physical product. And that was a very exciting job in my life, just working for uh, as a young woman with the name Estee. Working at Estee Lauder was exciting. Just access to all of the beauty brands. We had the store we could get
Yeah.
items at a discount. For the first few months, my entire salary went to beauty products. But seeing millions of products being designed, shipped all over the world, sold, and they have to be sold successfully and they have to do better than the previous product. And being able to identify gaps in efficiency, and to drive difference. One of the things I did when I was there, we managed the sampling program. So for every product that's sold, there are also free samples
Hmm.
that are given out, and it's a marketing tool. And the way that was offered out
Okay.
to the different markets, I did the process, I think, for 3 or 4 cycles, and I thought there's a more efficient way to do it, instead of doing it twice a year, to do it once a year, because the company knows what we're launching on an annual basis. The plans are annual. So instead of having everyone
Hmm.
go through the headache of planning for samples twice a year, I propose that we match it to the actual sales pipeline. And that resulted in huge savings to the company.
Okay.
And that was the first time I was like, okay, it doesn't matter, even if you're sort of one person of thousands, there's still a way to have impact, and to improve things. And I wanted to advance in my career. Melanie had her MBA from Cornell Business School, Marjorie, who was her boss, everyone had an MBA. So I knew I had to go to business school if I wanted to advance. So at the time, there was this founder, Kate Bouchamp. She went to Harvard Business School. She spent a summer interning at Estee Lauder, and she founded a company called Birchbox, um, which was a company that offered samples for sales. So you would pay
Hmm.
$20 a month, and you would get a box of samples every month. Um,
Okay.
and for her, it's booked revenue. The brands are giving away this stuff for free, anyways. For them, it's marketing, and she's selling it to an audience, and she's getting
Hmm.
people to pay for a product that's essentially free. So I thought that was a brilliant
Oh,
business
that's cool.
model.
That's a cool business idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought we could do it. I
Yeah.
did the sampling program at Estee Lauder. I tried to pitch it, multi-brand, cross-sell opportunity. It went nowhere, but I already
Hmm.
love that type of thinking. And when I went to business school, I said, I'm going to try to start a startup. I'm going to try to start a company and we'll see what takes off. So those ideas that didn't go anywhere. And then I sort of flipped my attitude. I spent a summer in Israel in a startup accelerator with a lot of founders. Some of whom are very successful, and they were approaching it from a completely different standpoint. So instead of writing business plans and founding and putting together teams, and submitting for competitions and trying to find funding, like they just started building the product and getting it out
Hmm.
to clients. And once there were clients, then they started saying, okay,
Hmm.
how do I make this into something official? How do I get funding? But that was the second thing. It wasn't we need funding in order to launch this idea. It's like the idea was burning in them. So when I came back to school, I had discovered a
Mm.
sample sale, and I went to one event. I got to it by
Hmm.
accident, and then I signed up for an email list. I went to another event, started meeting people. I ended up partnering with someone who had built an application technology for something completely different that wasn't being used. And I asked them, can I repurpose your technology to be a sample sale map, essentially, where people, you open it and you see
Oh.
which events are happening near you. And that ended up really taking off. Without any spend, we got up to 4,000
Hmm.
active users within 2 months. So I had a full-time job after business school lined up, and they tell you to never do this, or they'll never speak to you again on the offer after school because I managed to secure some funding. And my goal for the summer was figure out how to make $1 of profit. If anyone on any side can pay $1 for this, then do this. So I
Hmm.
didn't take the full-time job, ended up working on Shop Drop full time for a year. And from there, we built out, it was a team of 8. We upgraded the app, monetized in 3 different channels. Um, Ultimately, I wasn't interested in fashion, and the people who joined were much more interested, and they're running the company to this day. Um, but it was
Mm.
really a great
Cool.
experience in terms of getting things done. Like, I was the key decision maker. We didn't have millions of meetings trying to make many different parts of the group happy. It was like, are we doing this or are we not? And if yes, we're all in, and we work on it. And that's, I think, one of the most. I've been at another early stage company that grew very fast, and I saw it actually go from the stage where it was like, we want to do something, let's do it, to the stage where it's just too big and political, and that ability to move quickly, I think is something that should be kept, and should be preserved no matter which company you're in.
Got it. And how would you compare, working with a company that is growing rapidly compared to, let's say, a more established sort of like type of Fortune 500 company? And you've also mentioned the agility in the decision making. So my question first would be like, how would you compare these experience? And second question, how could, let's say, bigger companies adapt that kind of like agile mindset a little bit better, and therefore result in a kind of like faster operational cycle?
Yeah, I think in a company that's growing fast, there's very strong alignment on mission and what needs to get done. So if I think to Shop Drop, to Cerebral, it's like you come in and you're like, what needs to get done? Let's do it. Um, in larger companies, a lot of the work that has to get
Mm-hmm.
done is already done. Things are stable, processes are working, it's a well-oiled
Mm-hmm.
machine. So if you bring in a new person or someone comes in, first of all, there are many times when there really isn't work to justify X team. So a lot of teams just start working to figure out what's their purpose. And this sort of white space, it can cause opportunity to discover new areas or what can be done better, but it can also lead to a place
Mm-hmm.
where companies over index on process and make things very process heavy just because that will occupy time or fill full-time weeks
Mm-hmm.
rather than thinking, is this really necessary? And then the other big problem that
Mm-hmm.
occurs in organizations with many large different
Mm-hmm.
areas is conflict of interest. And that's when different uh, parts of leadership start rowing in different directions or fundamentally disagree on the future of the business. And those are pieces I just finished reading by Patrick Lenciani,
Mm-hmm.
the Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And he says it's basically like imagine a boat, rowboat, and there
Mm.
are, six people on each side, and everyone's rowing in a different direction. You won't get anywhere. So I think that's the biggest pitfall of a team where you could have the smartest people in the room, the most educated people, the most experienced people, et cetera, et cetera. But if everyone's focused on their own thing or rowing against each other, then it's very hard. It becomes very difficult to accomplish anything or to move anything forward.
Esty, can you tell us a little bit more about what was your kind of like motivational factors for joining Cerebral in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for most of the places I worked at, the teams and the people I met in the interview process were the highest motivating factor. So the person
Mm-hmm.
who recruited me at Cerebral, I was very impressed by him. I was very impressed by the company growth, by the mission. And then throughout the interview process, I'd met with a number of team members on the product org and on the business org, and I came away very impressed from the
Mm-hmm.
conversations and with the feeling of, yes, I would love to be a part of this and I would love to put my skill to good use at this company.
What kind of challenges were you pursuing when it came to working with Cerebral?
Yeah, we were, I mean, in the beginning, just when I joined, we were growing very fast. And it went from a company, from a startup that was like 5, 6 people in a WeWork in under a year to close to 200 employees. So we were just trying to catch up with what we needed to be doing, with what the customers needed. When I joined,
Mm-hmm.
like I think everyone I know was just working overtime. We would start our days at 7 a.m., ended at midnight. Like there were nights when we stayed up until 3, 4 a.m. just working through things that had to be fixed. So in the beginning, it was just making sure that our offering is tight, that everything is working properly as designed. That was sort of step one, and then step two was really strategizing into what do the next steps look like, what do we offer, how do we make what we offer better and stronger, listening to our
Mm-hmm.
customers, understanding where their pain points, what can we fix, what can we clean up so that the customer experience is better. I just want to give one story that I love, and I think I'll remember forever. On LinkedIn, someone sent me a message and said,
Sure.
"Hey, I was just going through the flow, like as a customer, and I got stuck on this page." And he was a product manager, but a technical product manager, and he said, "I think this is the bug." And literally, as he said it, like on the Slack channels, it was like, "We found this bug," and I said, "Could this be the solution?" And 5 minutes later, the engineers were like, "Yes, that's the problem." I offered him the position. He was like, "No, I'm very happy with my job." I just wanted to point this out. But we were a very young company,
Mm-hmm.
and setting up systems and processes.
I was wondering from your perspective as a product manager in Cerebral, what are your kind of like superhero, I guess, type stories, the motivational ones, the kind of experience that you would always remember as your kind of like highlights in your career?
Yeah, I think at Cerebral, the thing I'll end up walking away with sort of there were a few things that I came away with that were very important to me. So one was um how well product engineering and design work together. It was really and I didn't even realize how
Hmm.
good we have it until I started speaking with other companies and seeing how much of a challenge those relationships are in other places.
Mm.
Um and I think what made that relationship work well
Hmm.
was two factors. Number one, within those things, within this those three organizations, there was 100% alignment on what we need to work on. So there wasn't a feeling where an engineer says, "I'm
Hmm.
going to prioritize A," and the product person says, "No, we need to prioritize B." So we were all moving in the same direction, and there was no conflict about that. And then the second thing that I think is very important that gets missed in other places is the respect, and the delineation of responsibility. So um, engineering has their area of expertise, and that's defining what's the best way from an engineering standpoint to structure and to build a certain thing. And it can be
Correct.
they can say this is the best way to build it if you want it fast, but this is the best way to build it if you want it to be a long time. And you have to let engineering do their piece. Same for design. If design needs to do their research, or if they feel something has to be in a certain way, it's not product's job to say I don't like the color of this button. Ultimately, design comes in. They have
Hmm.
their expertise, they have their copy, and you can ask questions on both sides. But once you start making decisions or feeling those team or making those teams feel disempowered, and it goes both ways. I'm just talking about it from the point of view from product because that's my area. And likewise, design and engineering rely on product for the prioritization piece, for understanding what does the roadmap look like, what's the direction we're heading in. Together, that created a very strong trifecta where we were able to deliver a lot within the timelines with high quality. So that's one of the things I'll take
Hmm.
with me uh, to my next place.
I feel like also part of the sort of like unspoken duties of a product manager is people relationship management. And I was wondering, what is your take on if a person is good at it naturally? Could he improve through science, let's say books, studies about personal relationships, or vice versa? If a person is lacking in these qualities, yeah, could he improve through science, or is it like the art of itself? You're just born with that, and there's nothing that you can pretty much do about that.
I think some people are good. Like just some people have a natural talent, and that can't be taken away. But there's no doubt that reading books, listening to podcasts, watching how other leaders work, and trying to improve will definitely help. There's from one of the Freakonomic books. There's a whole case on how parents who have books raise more successful children than parents who don't have books in the house. And the whole chapter goes through trying to understand, is it the kind of books that they have? What if you go to the library and you take them and
Mm,
return them? Does that matter? And ultimately, the point was it's not the book itself, it's the fact that you're the type of parent who wants to be a better parent, who wants to improve, that ultimately makes you a
mm,
better parent
mm-hmm,
and makes the child outcome better. So I think the idea with self-improvement is similar. If you're a type of leader, um, or team member who wants to be the best they can, and you're constantly working on that, then you will ultimately be better. I am very inspired actually by my team members at Cerebral. I loved my team members. A lot of them were number one personal clients of the business, which is always good because they're interacting with the product. They
Mm.
understand it from the customer
Yeah.
standpoint. They don't need to step out and talk, obviously that's also part of the process, but they understand it.
Yeah.
The second piece
Hmm.
is that they would always come to me. I listened to this on a podcast. You have to read this book. And together it was like this path to self-improvement. So I love that. Another thing I'll say, and this is one of the Amazon principles, leaders are correct or leaders are right often. And when I read it, that quality annoyed me a little bit because I was like, you can't control if you're right or not. You can control if you're customer obsessed, you can control if you're data driven, you can control if you work hard, but whether you're right or not is not up to you.
Hmm.
But in working with people
Yeah.
around me, I I started to appreciate the value more because if you're taking advice or requests for what to build from different people, and you have one person who tells you build A, build B,
Hmm.
build C, and you build all those things, and all of them end up being a disaster. And then you have another person, and I'm thinking of someone particular in my mind, and if he listens to this, he'll know I'm thinking of him. And one after another, what he tells you to build is a success. Then when you want advice or when you want to set your strategy, who are you going to go to for advice? To the person who's correct or to the person who works hard but isn't? So I think working on yourself is a good thing, but
Hmm.
ultimately, like, you either a lot some people just have it and are naturally good at it, and some people, I'm going to say, need to work really hard at it.
Got it. Very interesting. Yeah. And for those who are struggling, for all the people watching, listening that are struggling with these types of things, maybe you have like a few tips and tricks for those people that they can implement right away. That do not require that much of a getting to know things. Just simple things that they can basically maybe copy and apply in their workflow. Of course, there is no such thing as one fits all. But for instance, if we're talking about if a person is struggling with the decision making with regards to where to take the product next, right? There is a lot of data, there is a lot of information from stakeholders, and ultimately the time has come to make a decision. What are your sort of like guidelines?
When it comes to making a decision for product, I feel like the answer should always be what's the best thing for the customer. If you follow that path, then and use that as your guiding light, then you'll end up with a good strategy. I think that question is very different from the previous question, which was how do you get along with others or how do you build strong relationships?
Yeah.
So, something a person I worked with, who I respect very much, said, he said, when he was going through the interview process, then a lot of the things, or when he was interviewing others for roles, not when he was hiring others, not being hired, but a lot of the things they were looking at when they give
Hmm.
someone a problem is not to see what the solution is, but what they wanted to see is how does the person listen to questions, or do they just take the question and answer it, or do they try to see, hey, is there anything that they want me to address but they're not actually saying, and to try to understand the why um
Hmm.
behind what's being asked. I think for someone whose job it is to manage people and to get buy-in, it's important to understand how people work, how people think, what drives people. That is going to be essential into understanding how to make them feel valued, how to make them feel rewarded, how to help them make them feel supported. Some people will appreciate going through every word in a presentation and they'll feel supported that way. Someone else might feel like, why are you micromanaging me? Get off my back. So, as a manager, you'd want to know that balance and to be able to support your team where they need help the most. It's important to give people what they need and to understand their needs. But the other thing that I think is very important is to establish trust, so that your team trusts you to listen to them and to represent them and to fight for them. And you trust them to do their best work and to come to you when they have issues. Because the last thing you want as a manager is for your team to be scared of you and if something is going wrong and you don't know about it, and then everything explodes in your face. You want them to feel safe to you and to say, hey, this is going wrong. And that's when I help them resolve it. Because ultimately, I hire people to do work. I don't want to do the work for them. And what I'm there for is to fix problems when they're there.
Yeah, fixing problems. You've mentioned, I think, one of the core qualities of a product manager. What, in your opinion, are the other qualities that define a product manager in any domain?
Yeah, I think the job of product managers is to represent the customer of the product they're building for. So it could be true in a company that's direct to consumer, or it could be true in a company that's B2B. Just the consumer is different. But product managers have to design and build and get everyone to work around an experience that's going to serve the customer. And if it's not built for the end customer who's going to use it, if it's not built for them in mind, it's not going to work. A big piece of that is edge cases. It means, we have an idea of how people will move through the product, but very often people won't move through the product the way we design it, or envision it. So we need to design flows for alternative uses of product. The other thing is, very often as product managers, you'll be asked to build things that are not good ideas, either because someone thinks it could help the business. I had one example where someone on
Hmm.
the business side came over to us and said, we need to build this because we need to grow X
Very good
part of the
call. Yeah.
business. And then one of my product managers looked at me and she said, which customer problem is this solving? Have we seen any complaint from customers or any indication that this would be well
Yeah.
received? And the answer was no. Yeah, so we went back and we said we're not doing it. We ended up doing it because we were forced to, and it ended up not performing. Huge shocker there. Um, but the reality is, if there's it, it I think, like, just by making it clear that we define strategy based on what will be accepted by the customer, that's already a
Oh, yeah.
success. And if you think about
Yep.
it, in companies, you'll have every part um, represented at the decision making table except for the customer, right? You have the finance people, you have the marketing people, you have, if it's a medical company, the clinicians, but who's representing the customer? And everything's being done for the customer. So the job of product is to sit at the table and to be that customer, to be that customer voice.
For some of our folks that are in, let's say, Fortune 500 companies, they're product managers and they're kind of like KPI oriented, what would be your piece of advice for them?
Your customers are human beings. Um, Build for edge cases, and sometimes not launching is something is better than launching something. I think these principles are true universally. I would just make a comment for people in Fortune 500s. Try to make circles, try to work around initiatives where there is alignment, where there's agreement that this is what we should be doing.
How can they impact their environment so things get a little more kind of like faster when it comes to the cycle for the decision making? Is there something that they can do?
Having an understanding of what are the bottlenecks in the process to get things forward, and then figuring out how you won't change or revolutionize an entire Fortune 500 company if you're in middle management. But what you can do is build mini processes that avoid the bottlenecks entirely. And you can create, sort of within a large organization, a more agile operation that is able to deliver high quality products in good timelines.
Got it. And maybe finally, for talented product managers, excuse me, who are considering to switch to a healthcare domain, not necessarily maybe having a good like healthcare domain background, what would be your piece of advice for them? Is it possible to switch?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in America, anything's possible. No, but a lot of people use master's degrees as an opportunity to career switch. Like, most people who go into an MBA program will go out with someone else's job. Um, I would say leverage your networks and then look at your past experience and figure out how what you've done can be relevant to the industry you're going to next.
Got it. And what would be like your, I guess, top three examples of such qualities that most of talented product managers possess? I think that we've touched base on it, but just like as a summary.
Yeah, I would say customer obsession is the highest one. Let's call it customer obsession as the guiding light. Um, another quality that's very important is the ability to execute. You can have the best strategy and the best ideas, but if you can't deliver them, then you're useless. Um, and then the ability to take a step back when necessary and to let your partners do their work. Product managers, I it's often viewed as a tough career because the engineers don't report to you, the designers don't report to you, they report into their own verticals, but it's your job to make sure everyone does their work so that the project actually launches. So that's where also political acumen, respect, and understanding of where talented people are and how they do their work, and working with them and helping them do the best they can do is ultimately necessary for success.
Got it. And what is like one thing that you would do differently in your um, current, like most future opportunity than you typically did?
Yeah, I would say much more research before making a decision. I think this next role that I'm about to take,
Hmm.
I spent 6 months looking for the right role. And I never went through a recruitment process like that, quite like that before. Um, where as much as you're being interviewed, you're interviewing others. And in my proposals, I wasn't necessarily putting forth what I thought
Hmm.
the company or the CEO might want to hear, but I tried out the products as a customer, and then I came with my critique and my complaints, as a customer would, and I said, if the company doesn't hire me, that's fine, but this is how I view my job, and this is how I would approach it. So ultimately, I tried to, and I think in the future I'm going to try to approach companies and products more on my own terms. I have a style of working. I have an idea of how things are
Hmm.
influenced, and ultimately, I want to be in a place that wants that kind of skill and attribution instead of hiding myself and trying to fit into something that I'm not. And I think ultimately there are many different companies in the world, many different projects, and a person who might be a great fit in one place might do very poorly somewhere else. So it's your job as a candidate, just as much as it is the company's job as the employer, to figure out, is this a place where I can be myself? Is this a place where I'll want to wake up in the morning and do my work? Um, and those are questions like I didn't even ask, sort of going into roles, or at least with such magnitude before.
Yeah. And I think also these types of questions are only possible in a market conditions where there is so much opportunity, there is so much things that are going on that you definitely have a chance to select something that fits you on the kind of like deepest level. Yeah, Esty, thank you very much. I think you've also mentioned that you're launching your own podcast.
So I'm thinking about it. Well, I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, for anybody who's interested networking with Esty, please check out her LinkedIn page. She also has a website. I think Esty would be open for such network opportunities. Esty, it's been a pleasure to talk to you on this episode. Everyone, you've listened to CareMinds podcast. I was your host Daniel. This has been Esty Goldschmidt. Thank you very much. Until next time.